Pilot Adventure Time. While doing a dance Jake downloaded from the internet with his mind, Penn notices Princess Bubblegum's rainicorn flying overhead while crying. Penn and Jake follow her, trying to cheer her up with jokes before arriving at the border of the Ice Kingdom, where they see why she is so sad. Princess Bubblegum has been kidnapped by the Ice King. So they take a few penguins and sled into the kingdom, taking out a few monsters with snowballs before arriving at the castle. Penn does battle with the Ice King, but gets frozen as Jake is chatting it up with Lady Rainicorn. But after his mind is transported back in time, and to Mars, where Abraham Lincoln gives him a pep talk, Penn breaks out of the ice and chases down the king. He leaps from Jake's back to rescue the princess as Jake takes out Ice King by punching off his crown. Once saved, Princess Bubblegum rewards Penn with a kiss, and he leaves with Jake to save an old man who's being robbed by ninjas. Initially pitched to Nickelodeon's Random Cartoons, this pilot was instead picked up by Cartoon Network when attempts to get Nick to pick up the show properly fell through. This is why the pilot remains at such a low resolution in this retrospective. It's never been officially licensed out because, the networks are competing. As a pilot, it carries with it little of the characterization the characters will be known for moving forward, as well as almost none of the original cast. Only John DiMaggio reprises his role of Jake the dog. But what does remain consistent is arguably the most important part of the show, the style. Jokes at first don't move the plot forward, but then they do when the plot shifts around punchlines. It's as if the writers are playing off one another, with one person writing something and the other yes-anding it to the next beat of the story. This creates a type of plot structure where the destination is not particularly important and the journey's all there is, or in other words, an adventure. A time of adventure. The title card. Slumber Party Panic. Finn and Princess Bubblegum are working on a resurrection potion, designed to bring the dead candy people back to life. But while testing this potion, it splashes on a graveyard, not bringing the candy people to life, but undeath. Princess Bubblegum sequesters all the citizens of the Candy Kingdom inside her castle, asking Finn to make a royal promise not to tell anyone about the zombie outbreak, as candy people explode when they're scared. She works on a decorpsinator serum, while Finn is tasked with keeping the people at the slumber party distracted, but Jake is constantly trying to get Finn to reveal his secrets. Finn, under the guise of playing party games, distracts Jake and convinces the candy people to wear blindfolds and smash piñatas, actually the encroaching zombies. Once they're all dispatched, Princess Bubblegum returns and Finn tells her and Jake what really happened, causing time to freeze because Finn broke his royal promise. Two Gumball Guardians grab Finn and PB, demanding a trial by math, despite Finn being bad at math. But the question is easy and the solution is so simple, it helps PB solve her own equation as she overlooked it for being too simple. The duo returns to the castle and Princess Bubblegum is able to return the undead to regular life. As understood by Finn, the moral of the story is that if you break your promises, you get to fight zombies and have a slumber party and reverse death. The gag being that Finn missed the point of the moral, as it was a tenuous point in the first place. For one, breaking a promise might hurt the person you made the promise to, and will make future promises mean far less as people trust in you less. But in universe, Gumball Guardians will grab you out of time to make you undergo trials. The first season of Adventure Time is a show far less interested in telling a cohesive story with a solidly defined moral than it is in showing off a series of gags that keep the viewer guessing as to where the story could go next. But this isn't to say that these lessons are entirely absent. Jake winds up teaching the real moral, that it's okay to withhold information from your friends without lying to them. If Finn had just said, "I can't tell you because I promised PB I wouldn't," then a real friend like Jake wouldn't have pressed the issue. Saying you're not telling somebody something and explaining why is ironically more honest than refusing to elaborate at all, and sometimes honesty is more about being honest with intentions than it is about revealing information. Trouble in Lumpy Space. After falling fangs first onto Jake at a tea party, Lumpy Space Princess reveals that she may have infected him with the lumps, and that he has to take an antidote that can only be found in Lumpy Space before sundown, or he'll be lumpy forever. They head to Lumpy Space, where the group meets LSP's princess, but when she argues with them, they ban her from using the car, meaning they can't go to Makeout Point to get the antidote, without calling one of LSP's friends for a ride even though she's dating her ex. Along the way, Jake starts transforming more and more into a lumpy spaceman. They arrive at Makeout Point, where they see some teenagers taking turns sitting on the antidote, a ball that turns them smooth. But it's too late, as Jake has become fully lumpy, more obsessed with the weekly prom-coming dance than returning to normal. Finn allows the teens to bite him so he can be lumpy enough to fly to the dance, where he tries to get Jake to sit on the antidote, which only works when Finn fully transforms and starts refusing to share. Once cured, Jake cures Finn as well, and they apologize to LSP by dancing with her. The early seasons of Adventure Time have far less continuity than later seasons by the simple fact that there are fewer episodes to fall back on. So the job of the early episodes of any show is to introduce the setting and characters. Here we meet Lumpy Space Princess. At first, she comes across as self-centered and uncaring, and this is because she is. In order to have a character develop, there first has to be a point that they develop from, and so LSP is shown as not really caring she's making Jake lumpy. At least, from the outside. Sure, her personality is off-putting, but she does at least try to do the right thing by taking her friends with her to Lumpy Space. And when Jake himself turns lumpy, he stops caring about turning back. Even Finn begins to grow selfish when he becomes fully lumpy. It's this disparity between the personalities of each character at the end of the episode that actually informs the type of person Lumpy Space Princess is. She's contradicting her existing nature to treat Jake's lumpiness, despite this being something that she would obviously view as unappealing. The fact that the Guardians of the Antidote are spoken about in whispers due to being smooth shows that LSP is even a bit weirdly accepting. If the people of Lumpy Space show so much animosity towards smooth people, the very fact that LSP would spend time with the others in the first place tells us more about her personality than anything else could. Prisoners of Love. Finn and Jake are cooling off by playing in the Ice Kingdom when they bump into the Ice King. They make fun of him when he demands respect, so the Ice King freezes them and brings the duo to his lair, where Finn and Jake are locked in a cell with several princesses. The Ice King explains that he's trying to kidnap every princess, as he intends to marry one of them eventually. Jake is completely frozen, and Finn doesn't have anything to escape with, but when he sees the Ice King desperately trying to make sure everyone is having fun in their cell, he comes up with a plan. Finn encourages the princesses to fake fun as much as possible to invite the Ice King into the cell with them, and when he comes inside, they beat him up and leave. When the Ice King is punched, his crown flies off and he passes out, hallucinating a cosmic owl, who tells him he's a sociopath, though even in his dream the Ice King ignores this. While dropping off the princesses at their homes, the Slime Princess tries confessing to Finn, though Jake covers for him by saying Finn pees his pants and can't marry her. The Ice King is one of the few characters returning from the pilot. He's downgraded from his already pretty quick-to-dispatch self. Here, his habit of collecting princesses is already displayed as a pathetic habit that makes all of the future humiliations of his character well-deserved, rather than risking the guy coming across as a hopeless romantic. Sometimes you just need a villain whose purpose is to get beaten up without anybody in the audience feeling bad about it. And while sure, it's a bit simplistic to have a black and white morality like this, it keeps in line with the show's aesthetic. Adventure Time is, at once, a kid's show and a parody of a kid's show. Of course, this is really only true of the first few seasons. If you want to pull the rug out from underneath somebody, you first need to set the rug down, and then get the audience on top of it. The Ice King is a pretty simplistic, crazy wizard, for now. By this point, the truth of his identity is almost as well known as the show itself. People who haven't even seen Adventure Time can identify the name Simon Petrikov. But instead of front-loading this retrospective with a bunch of foreshadowing and deeper character dives, it's an easier watch to take episodes as they come, as that's how these early seasons were written and how they were originally enjoyed. Tree Trunks. While eating some of Tree Trunks' pie, she asks Finn and Jake what their dream is, revealing that hers is to pick a crystal apple from deep in the dark forest. Finn and Jake agree to accompany her to this apple so she can have her own adventure, but they quickly realize she's not adventurer material when she tries applying stickers to a wall of flesh that attacks them. She later attempts to have a picnic with a bunch of sentient signs that surround her, with Finn getting jacked up when he uses his body to defend her from their attacks. She even tries to seduce a tentacle monster that Finn is fighting when Jake is too nice to hold her back from getting involved. So Finn snaps at her, saying she should never have adventured with them and causing Tree Trunks to wander into the woods alone. But she manages to find the crystal apple after all, protected by a crystal guardian who mimics the actions of anybody nearby. When Tree Trunks starts singing and dancing with some of the forest denizens, the crystal guardian copies her, and with no way to beat it in a fight, Finn and Jake start to dance too. The crystal guardian allows them to finally pick and eat the apple, and they give Tree Trunks the honor of taking the first bite, which causes her to explode. Tree Trunks is shown to have survived the explosion at the end of this episode, crawling around inside some sort of crystal structure as a demand of the executives in charge of approving the episode. So what was originally going to be a totally random ending to this episode wound up being more open-ended than the showrunners anticipated it would be, and this will be important later. As I said before, Adventure Time is a show that quickly alternates between a kids show and a parody of one, and sometimes it does both of these in the same scene. Tree Trunks is a character from a more light-hearted series, while Finn and Jake find themselves in a show with a darker tone. But what makes these two ideas distinct is the realm of consequence. How an action is treated has more to do with the tone of the action itself. Finn is jacked up by the denizens of the forest, but because it's played as a joke, it comes across as a joke, instead of being something worth showing concern for. The end of the episode is where these two ideas combine. Tree Trunks is able to save the day by dancing in the presence of a monster that Finn and Jake struggled against, the setting itself warping around whichever character is stealing the scene. In this way, the chaos of the setting tends to make emotional sense, if not narrative sense. The Enchiridion. After saving Princess Bubblegum from a fall, she calls him a hero worthy of seeking out the Enchiridion, a book about heroism sealed behind a series of heroic challenges. Finn and Jake head out to retrieve this tome, solving puzzles and trying to rescue imps in spite of their desire to destroy old ladies anytime Finn does anything. Jake reassures him they aren't real old ladies, and that everything is just an illusion meant to test his heroism. And then, he is eaten by a giant. Finn steals from the giant to get him to lower his guard, then kicks his stomach to force it to vomit out his friend, though he returns the dollar he stole when the giant looks sad about being robbed. Once inside the castle, Finn is placed into a mental test, where he fights an evil monster, but refuses to punch a morally neutral ant. For his heroism, and in spite of punching the Great Guardian due to his pajamas looking like a devil suit, he is given the Enchiridion, where he learns how to kiss princesses, though he's too embarrassed to reveal what it says to Princess Bubblegum. Like so much else in Adventure Time's first season, the Enchiridion is something introduced as a gag item, only to reappear a few times before its true significance is revealed. But for now, it's just a book that gets tossed into the background of Finn and Jake's house, with a few callbacks made here and there. This sort of raises the question to longtime watchers of how much the show is planned in advance, and how much is made up on the fly. And interviews with the creators reveal it's far closer to the latter, though not entirely. I've mentioned before that most of the show is written by the artists, whose creative process largely consisted of drawing a few sketches about things that looked neat, coming up with a few details about it, then adding whatever they could into the episodes proper. This means that, while all the lore surrounding the Enchiridion was likely not come up with on the spot, there was certainly more to it that the showrunners never got around to adding to the episode, and having details that are unspoken makes it easier to justify keeping the tome around on the off chance that there's another opportunity later on. So while Adventure Time started out as a show with very little lore about it, there was enough behind the scenes, it's not surprising that this could have appeared later on. The Jiggler. While singing an auto-tuned song on their way back from an adventure, Finn and Jake discover a small whistling creature who they name the Jiggler, taking it home for a late-night dance party. The next morning, Finn prepares to party some more, only for the duo to realize that Jiggler looks sick. They feed it some food, and when that doesn't work, feed it drawings of food. But it only gets worse, eventually exploding when Finn and Jake try to plug the holes it's excreting from. After piecing the Jiggler back together, Finn attempts CPR, which teaches the Jiggler to kiss patterns, which it uses to indicate that it wants to return home to its mother. They take this creature back to its home, but the mother Jiggler does not accept its young. Jake realizes it's because they've imprinted onto it, so Finn dunks it in the Jiggle Juice so it'll be accepted again, and the duo heads home, vowing never again to kidnap a child. Adventure Time jumps dramatically between being a kids show and a parody of a kids show, but on occasion there will be episodes, especially early season episodes, where it's more of the former than the latter. Sure, some of Finn's reactions to the mother Jiggler not accepting its kid back are over the top, and the Jiggler itself vomiting uncontrollably is not really young child friendly, but this doesn't make them the type of gags that adults would find funnier. Just a bit of random weirdness for the sake of random weirdness. This is in line with most of the early show's vibes, but in the long run, episodes like this don't have a lot of staying power, with the only real aspect of this episode coming back in the future is the fact that Finn swallowed a computer. Ricardio the Heart Guy. For saving Princess Bubblegum from the Ice King again, Finn and Jake are thrown a party at the Candy Kingdom. But rather than being able to dance with PB as he wanted, the princess is infatuated with a talking heart named Ricardio, who's able to discuss science with her on a level Finn can't keep up with. Finn starts to feel jealousy towards Ricardio and plans on performing a stakeout to determine if his feelings about the guy are true or not, though Jake thinks Ricardio's a good guy, something he believes is confirmed when they catch the man beating up the Ice King. They confront him on this, with Finn eventually punching Ricardio when he refuses to elaborate on who he is, making PB upset that Finn has turned so violent. But his suspicions are confirmed when the Ice King drags himself out of an alleyway to tell them where the heart came from. It's the Ice King's own heart, who left his body after an experiment gone wrong, and who plans on stealing Princess Bubblegum's heart, literally, to marry it. Finn catches him in the act, and he and Jake beat up the heart, who is eventually forcefully reunited with the Ice King, as PB thanks the duo for saving her from the Ice King again. There's a repeated discussion throughout this episode as to whether Ricardio is evil or not, as though that were a binary discussion to have that could be ranked objectively. But this is not so bizarre a thing to consider when taking into account the inspiration for much of Adventure Time's character, so to speak, early tabletop RPGs. Most of these systems have an objective means of ranking one's alignment, so to ask whether a sentient heart is good or evil is far more valid of a question. This retroactively applies to Finn's suspicion of the guy at the outset of the episode. Even though all he did was make Finn jealous, he wanted to hate the guy and needed a reason to do so. One can imagine that if there was no objective moral ranking system in the universe, then Finn would have just kept stalking the guy until he did something wrong, as he wasn't looking to confirm his feelings, but to justify them. Business time. While melting some icebergs to find stuff to build a gauntlet dock, Finn and Jake discover a flock of frozen businessmen. These businessmen want jobs, so Jake convinces Finn to hire them to finish the dock for them, which they do efficiently enough to get hired to assist with hero work. After taking notes on the way that Finn and Jake rescue the hot dog princess, these businessmen are soon given the job of doing hero work themselves, while Finn and Jake save their energy for the big projects. They spend the next several days eating ice cream and playing video games while leaving the heavy lifting to the businessmen, who eventually do all the work for them. But while being fat on the couch together, Finn hears fuzzy friends calling for help, as the businessmen have taken to kidnapping people to keep them safe as a form of preemptive heroism. Finn tries to rescue them but is too sluggish to do anything, so he has Jake get absorbed by the business machine, where he expands, destroying it from the inside. In the end, Finn rehires all the businessmen to jump back into the iceberg and drift around in the ocean once more. Finn is a hero, according to himself. That means that he does heroic things, mostly consisting of going from party to party and doing stuff like building a gauntlet dock until he hears a quest hook. When he adopts a flock of businessmen, though, these naive-to-the-world types begin to take heroism far more literally, to the point of forgetting the fun entirely. They start focusing on stopping problems before they start, but this means getting rid of the free will that the creatures of Ooh have to make decisions that put them in the danger in the first place. Just 2 episodes ago, Finn and Jake kidnapped the Jiggler by mistake, not because they're bad guys, but because they were acting in the moment. So there's a question to be asked regarding the true purpose of heroism in this series, where being a hero is more of a state of mind rather than a checklist of things one must do. We've seen before from episodes like Tree Trunks and the Enchiridion that heroism is less about good and evil binaries, and sometimes allowing a bad person to go free or putting someone into a dangerous situation because it's what they want. If Finn and Jake just attacked the Ice King for no reason, they would be no better, and most heroism is often retaliatory. My 2 favorite people. Jake misses out on fighting a science cat and a walking shark because of a scheduled date with Lady Rainicorn, only to arrive late to that date and miss her entirely. When he tells Shelby, the worm who lives in his viola, about this, she suggests that he spend time with both at once. This doesn't work out as Lady Rainicorn only speaks Korean, but they adventure together to find a universal translator that causes Finn to warm up to her in spite of her voice now sounding like an old man's. Finn and Lady Rainicorn spend the next few adventures together, excluding Jake as he finds there's no room for him on Lady's back, nor do they have any video games for more than 2 players. When he sees Finn and Lady Rainicorn in their old date spot, he gets angry enough to call Tiffany, a goblin boy who plays the viola with them, in an attempt to make the others jealous. This works with Finn attacking Tiffany, though Lady Rainicorn confronts Jake about his actions, and they agree to get rid of the universal translator and to keep being stupid together forever. Jake, after getting exactly what he wants, stops wanting that because it was less about the people around him and more about himself. Jake wanted to spend time with his friends, not for his friends to spend time with each other. The idea was for them to be more friendly, not just nearby, but it's hard to justify feelings of resentment or jealousy when you were the one who arranged the situation you're upset about in the first place. Nor is it easy to justify returning back to the way things were before because there's a reason you changed things in the first place. But while there's no real right answer, there are still plenty of wrong ways to deal with a situation, such as Jake trying to fight what he thinks is fire with his own fire, not asking his friends about giving him more leeway, but trying to make them hurt as much as he does by bringing over Tiffany to make them jealous. Worse is that this works, with Finn attacking the guy, although things do still work out in the end. Lady Rainicorn recognizes that Jake was only acting out of a sense of being hurt, and real friendships aren't ruined by one person doing something stupid, the very thing Lady says she likes about Jake in the end. Memories of Boom Boom Mountain. Finn is having a roughhousing session with a bunch of marauders when he hears crying. Remembering a time in his past where he made Boom Boom and no one came to help him, Finn vows to help out the source of the crying, a mountain who hates watching the marauders roughhouse all the time. He tries a few different ways to get them to be less violent, ultimately convincing the men to pet each other instead of punch, but these strategies don't work. So Finn decides to get the men to turn the mountain around, only to realize there's a second mountain who likes to look at the first one's backside. And a coal man who wants some quiet, some flowers who want to pollinate, mushrooms to seed, and so many others who all need help, with Finn unable to help them all. He's about to give up when he has a flashback of Jake's parents finally rescuing him from his own Boom Boom. Vowing to help everybody, Finn and Jake set up a Rube Goldberg machine where everyone helps everyone else, and soon, everything is fixed. Ordinarily, when a heroic protagonist has his backstory revealed, it's something tragic enough to justify their motivations for the rest of the series. Beat by beat, we see this sort of tragic history from Finn, although the details are tweaked in such a way that it becomes a punchline, enhanced by the fact that we're primed to expect a tragedy far greater than a baby who needs its diaper changed. And yet, because the story beats are played straight, what would otherwise be a comedic moment can end on a less silly note, Jake's parents discovering Finn and revealing they're brothers. This is a template of how Adventure Time is able to be a comedy and much more without sacrificing either of those two traits. It can eat its cake and have it too by using the narrative language of a show that takes itself far more seriously, allowing it to switch seamlessly just by changing around a few words. Wizard. While walking around talking about demon hearts, Finn is offered free wizard powers by a Reaper. He accepts and is transported to a monastery where a frog wizard, containing Bufo, the head wizard, begins to teach them a series of useless magical powers, like being able to read the emotions of dust or summoning mayonnaise. Jake is content with these new powers, but Finn wants to obtain the ultimate final power, taking a pledge of ultimate responsibility to obtain these. After getting the last star on his wizard robe, he's taken to a room where some old wizards are using their magic to stop a meteor from destroying the village. He's told he must spend the rest of his life contributing his magic to stop the meteor, but unwilling to do this, Finn breaks his pledge and tries to stop the meteor himself using all his powers at once. He fails to do this, but does convince the elderly wizards to move the village with him, saving everyone's lives. Bufo tries to claim this was his test all along, but Finn and Jake don't believe him, wandering off where the Reaper offers them a full-circle demon heart. The elderly wizards had the ability to stop the meteor from destroying the town all along, they just never thought to do it because holding it in place was the only thing they'd ever learned. Finn is the one who sees a strategy that's good enough as not good enough, and he wants something that's great. So he breaks a vow he made haphazardly, showing that he's not very responsible, as responsibility in this instance was a responsibility to a certain individual, rather than to the greater good. A lot of kids, and former kids, can relate to being told it's important to be mature and responsible, only to find out later that you weren't being mature, but obedient. Finn's recklessness winds up getting not only the monastery saved, but it saves the people who were previously protecting it from a life of servitude until the next sucker came along, looking for free wizard powers. Sometimes the status quo deserves to be broken in the interest of letting something better take its place. And also for continuity's sake, the creators have confirmed that it was the robes themselves that gave Finn and Jake the powers, which is why they can't conjure mayonnaise anymore. Evicted. Jake is scaring Finn with vampire stories, making it difficult to sleep, not helped by a worm crawling on the bed. But a real vampire shows up, Marceline the Vampire Queen, and she tells him she has spent the last 100 or so years traveling around Ooh, only to return to the treehouse she marked as hers years ago. Jake's afraid to fight a vampire, so he tells Finn they ought to find a new home, and after a bit of searching, they come across a cave. They clean up this cave a bit and throw a party that is crashed by Marceline, who has also marked this cave as her home. Finn and Jake try to leave, with Finn arguing that any place he has Jake is his home, so Marceline tries to kidnap Jake as well. Finn starts fighting her, but it's Jake who gets over his fear to attack as well. Yet when he is bit and has the color drained out of him, Finn flies into a rage and punches Marcy hard enough that she willingly lets them have their house back because she hasn't had a great fight in so long. Finn and Jake return to their treehouse to find it overrun with psychic worms who demand a hug. Marceline the Vampire Queen's introduction. I know I could shorten her name to Marcy if I wanted to, but Marceline the Vampire Queen is fun to say. Here, she's sort of a one-off villain, though paying attention to the opening credits will let you know there's far more to the character than there appears to be, purely because she's featured as prominently as the rest. In fact, she's one of the only 6 characters to appear in the initial pitch bible of the show, meaning that, unlike so much else in the show, she was planned from the start to come back. And this is fitting for this episode's plot as it makes some of the development matter more. Jake shows a fear of vampires, using them to scare Finn at first, revealing he's afraid of them himself shortly afterwards, and then the fear of Marcy being enough to keep him from trying to fight for his home. All the moments where he argues that home is where you have your friends ring a bit hollow if he's not willing to face his fears or even stand up for his friend when he wants to face his fears. But by the end, Jake is finally willing to fight directly through his own fear, and that's when he finally takes his own message seriously. It's when he earns his metaphorical home that he also wins his literal home, a metaphor made even better by the fact that the fight itself is what made Marceline the Vampire Queen give it back. City of Thieves. Finn and Jake come across the City of Thieves, which an old woman warns them will turn the duo into thieves if they enter. But when Finn sees a crying little girl named Penny outside the city, he vows to get the flower basket that was stolen from her back from inside the city, and that he'll remain pure while doing so. But when trying to stop thieves in the city, Jake tells Finn to give up on stopping all the crime because there's way too much of it. He tries focusing on just the flower basket, following it from thief to thief, until Penny suggests they go to the King of Thieves' castle in the middle of the city, where all the stolen goods eventually wind up. The king's castle is blocked by a barrier that prevents thieves from entering, but as Finn is yet to steal anything, he can enter. Once inside, he takes a chest and leaves, only for Penny to reveal she just wanted to trick Finn into stealing for her. Unable to return the treasure due to now being a thief, Finn vows to let the darkness of the city wash over him, channeling his inner Batman to steal his way on a revenge path to get back to Penny. But rather than robbing her, Finn and Jake scrub her with soap to purify her again, with the soap purifying them as well. Now clean, Finn vows to leave the city with his heart intact, only for Penny to rob him one last time before running off. As Finn spends more and more time in the City of Thieves, he learns that the city does indeed corrupt people who visit, not through some sort of supernatural means, but because everyone else is a thief, so stealing things is the only way to make a transaction. Sure, it's not the most realistic way to depict a fictional society, but nothing about an Adventure Time setting was ever supposed to depict realism. It's the way the characters act and react that we relate to, and watching Finn grow frustrated enough that he resorts to breaking his vow to stay pure that we the audience relate to. Jake figured it out pretty quickly, and Penny knew it all along. What makes Finn's action stand out, though, is the fact that after becoming a thief like everyone else, he vowed to return to the good side after he got what he wanted. The exact sort of pragmatism that causes people to resort to petty theft once they realize the punishment for this sort of thing is negligible. This sort of mentality makes far more sense if you consider morals and actions from the lens of if you were playing an RPG. In the real world, we know not to steal, but take a typical person and put them into the land of, say, Skyrim, and suddenly everything that's not nailed down becomes a target for a kleptomaniac. It's not until you're doing really well in a video game that you start to consider upholding a solid moral code, because now you can afford to. The Witch's Garden. Finn and Jake follow a frog into a witch's garden where they see bushes of donuts and cupcakes. But when Jake subconsciously eats one of them, the witch punishes him by taking away his powers and giving him a fat man-baby body. She says she'll only give his powers back if he apologizes, but Jake refuses to do this, working with Finn to figure out how to get his powers back by remembering where he got them in the first place and assuming it was when he rolled in a mud puddle, as that's his earliest memory. The duo travels to a mud puddle in spite of Jake being easily exhausted and refusing to do much more but laze around. But when Finn makes a catapult to launch him across a junk river, he awakens a garbage mermaid who kidnaps him as food for her hatchlings. Realizing his friend is in real danger and being too fat to climb up and scare off the chicks, Jake returns to the witch's garden when he and his subconscious have to dance together as a form of apology. But when Jake's subconscious dies due to being his old subconscious, he starts to cry, convincing the witch to return all his abilities. Jake smacks away her walking stick and rushes back to scare away the mermaid, saving Finn but refusing to admit what he had to do to save him. After Jake subconsciously steals a donut from the witch, something that's in character for him as he subconsciously stole a pair of boots during the last episode, he then has a crisis where his self-conscious spirit tries to talk him out of doing anything close to an apology. So in the end, when the witch makes his subconscious apologize as well, it's fitting as the two offending parties in this episode were Jake's mind and the physical body who urged him along the whole time. It's clear from the beginning of the conflict that the witch is being unreasonable to Jake, but the fact that his reaction is so indignant from the outset makes him culpable, not for the original offense, but the escalation of the conflict. So even though he is mistreated, you don't feel sorry for him as he winds up retroactively justifying the punishment with his later actions. It's at the end of the episode when he finally stops listening to his lazy inner voice, where Jake really earns his powers back. What is life? After Jake throws a garbage bag full of butter at Finn's face, Finn tries to come up with a way to prank him back. So he invents a never-ending pie-throwing robot, or Nepter, that doesn't work until it's struck by lightning. Realizing they need more lightning to have Nepter reach its full potential, Finn heads to the Ice Kingdom to steal some of the Ice King's lightning. He and Nepter sneak inside, nearly getting caught when they set off the alarm and slide into the lightning room. The lightning being stored there is destroyed by the Ice King's ice centipede, but when he notices the robot accompanying Finn, the Ice King zaps it, which is what they wanted anyway. But when Finn returns home with Nepter, the robot just wants to kidnap princesses like his father, the Ice King. The Ice King shows up, demanding his son, though Finn claims that he's the robot's real father. Nepter and Finn are taken into the Ice King's imagination zone, where he shows the robot the potential life he could live with each group. Forced to choose between the two, Nepter decides to prank Ice King with a pie, before returning home with Finn to throw infinite pies at Jake. Nepter winds up being forgotten by the cast and the showrunners for several seasons after this point, not appearing again for a few years, though not in a fairly negative way. Like most characters from the first season, it was meant to be forgotten about when the episode ended, as there was practically nothing in the way of continuity from plot to plot. Nepter is torn between two creators, Finn, who made the robot, and Ice King, who gave the robot its function. You can't really be a never-ending pie-throwing robot without never-ending pies. So when the question of parentage comes up, the audience is also forced to ask themselves if Nepter has more in common with the guy who made it, or the guy who molded its personality and gave its appendages use. In the end, this is a question answered by intention. Finn meant to build a pie-throwing robot, while the Ice King gave it sentience by accident. trying to make up for that later by taking the robot along with him to continue being evil. It's the original nature of the construct that wins out, seeing Imagination Zone footage of Finn and Jake farting on it that actually encourages the robot meant for pranking to embrace pranks as a lifestyle and rejecting princess stealing as a future. Ocean of Fear. While pooting on a newt for stealing their boots, Finn is afraid to go further, as they've entered the ocean, and he's afraid of the ocean as explained by the manifestation of his fear, which emerges from his belly button. Finn tries to recruit Jake to overcome his fear, but this mostly consists of Finn kicking Jake in the head a lot during exposure therapy. So Jake tries a different strategy of taking Finn underwater in a submarine so he can see the ocean himself. A strategy that works for a while until Jake takes him into an abyssal hole. Finn panics and crashes the submarine, floating up to the surface while an unconscious Jake sinks down below. Finn is once more confronted by his fear and vows to return to the ocean floor by knocking himself out with the wrench so he doesn't have to be awake for it. Once on the ocean floor, Jake congratulates Finn on overcoming his fear, though Finn reveals he's still scared and they return to the beach. Once there, Finn is confronted by more belly button demons who tell him he can still be a hero even if he's scared, as every hero has a flaw. Everybody knows that quote from A Game of Thrones about the only time a man can be brave is when he's afraid, and this episode is the embodiment of what that means. If Finn were a fearless hero, then all of his heroics would matter far less because it's not as though he had any sort of internal struggle to overcome to get to that point. Audiences are more likely to relate to characters who are flawed than they are to relate to a character who is perfect. So a grand sort of fear that exists as a mental block, even if it's a fear that becomes overcome later, can create much better stories because it creates much better characters. It's not even the flaws themselves that the audiences relate to, but the reactions these characters have to them. We're more likely to think of Finn as a memorable protagonist because he reacted poorly to exposure therapy, not because he was able to swiftly and easily overcome his problems with the most commonly suggested solution. In fact, Finn never overcame his fear of the ocean by the end of the episode, he merely stopped letting it stop him from rescuing his friend. His desire to perform a heroic feat outweighed his fears, and that's what's truly heroic about his character, that he's a hero even when it does not come easily. When Wedding Bells Thaw. The Ice King arrives at Finn and Jake's treehouse, fighting with Finn for a bit before remembering why he came, to announce that he's getting married to a willing bride, the old lady princess. But he wants a bachelor party, claiming he might have to go back to his old princess-stealing ways if he doesn't have one. So Finn and Jake throw him this party in spite of their dislike for the guy, eventually convincing him to go through with the marriage in spite of some doubt by showing him cannibal swans. The day of the wedding arrives, and everything is arranged so that the princess will be his bride when she touches his beard, a tradition of the Ice Kingdom. But on a closer inspection, Finn and Jake see that the old lady princess is crying, and that locked in her eyes is the real her, saying she's been brainwashed by the wedding ring. Jake is able to remove the ring from her finger just before he himself is frozen, and the Ice King tries to go through with the wedding anyway, touching not the old lady princess's fingers, but Jake's. The two are unmarried off-screen and return to ignoring the Ice King. The status quo is God in most series, the default state of the world being something that exists at the end and beginning of each episode, meaning that audiences ought not to be surprised when things return to normal. Sure, Adventure Time has already had a few episodes in the past with bizarre endings that were immediately forgotten about, at least in the moment, but here, the fact that the Ice King is going to stop kidnapping princesses is what makes the episode's plot suspicious at the outset. We know that the Ice King kidnaps princesses, we know that Finn and Jake stop him. So if they can stop him from doing this by helping him to get married instead of a swift kick to the face, then the plot structure remains the same, it's just the scheme that's a bit different. This episode does show off the weakness of the storyboard-driven writing style that Adventure Time has, the fact that the entire plot built up to a point where it was revealed that the Ice King didn't need any of the pep-talking Finn and Jake had done for him all along, as the princess was hypnotized from the start, meaning that the whole plot was a waste of time. But it doesn't feel like a waste of time though, as from the beginning of the show, Adventure Time has been more or less totally random, so it doesn't hurt the experience all that much that the plot doesn't make sense, because that's not what anybody is watching the show for. Dungeon. At the behest of Princess Bubblegum, Finn and Jake are putting a series of warning signs around a dungeon hole. Finn is curious about going inside, while Jake bets him he can't get in and out within the runtime of the episode. So Finn dives down there, where he avoids a series of obstacles as he's in his element, until meeting the demon cat with approximate knowledge of many things, who beats him up until realizing that he smells Jake on Finn, making him run away. Finn stumbles through the next few rooms of the dungeon, failing a series of fights and puzzles that would have been aided by Jake's powers, before being cornered by the Bucket Knight and rescued by a guardian angel, who reveals she just wants to eat him in a stew. Finn is placed into a boiling pot alongside Jake, who was captured as well when he couldn't solve any of the puzzles without Finn. The duo realize they work better as a team and escape, only to get overwhelmed by the demons released when they take a giant diamond. Princess Bubblegum flies in on a swan to save them, asking them if they learned anything from the experience, though both of them got the wrong lesson. Finn and Jake work best when they're together as a team, each one making up for the shortcomings of the other, as Finn is better at figuring out tricks and puzzles, while Jake makes up the raw power to the duo, though he often lacks the brain power to figure out how best to apply this ability. But this isn't really a revelation, as it's something that the episode says very plainly near the end. What's more interesting is the fact that, while they make up for each other's shortcomings in some ways, in other ways they both have the same flaws. Finn and Jake both think it's a good idea to ignore the signs they just posted to enter a dungeon, and even egg each other on to enter alone. But while they have some of the same faults, they also have the same boons. They're not total opposites after all. Both of them came to the same conclusions regarding their failure of working alone, so reconciliation at the end is swift and painless. Not that that was a lesson they ought to have been taught, much to the annoyance of Princess Bubblegum, the actual actor getting them out of the bad situation. The Duke. While Finn and Jake are smashing some potion bottles, they see Princess Bubblegum kicking the Duke of Nuts out of her castle while shouting at him. Finn then throws a boomerang-shaped bottle, which comes around and smashes into PB's window, turning her bald and green. When Finn goes up to apologize, PB blames the Duke for this, and says she'll never forgive the person who did that to her, demanding that Finn and Jake track him down to bring the man to justice. But when they head to the Palace of Nuts, they keep hearing from its citizens about how nice of a guy the Duke is, confirmed when they meet the man in person and see him comforting his son, the Marquis of Nuts, who was trying to take the fall for his father. Finn and Jake learn that the reason PB hates the Duke is because he keeps eating all her pudding, something he only does due to a medical pudding deficiency he wants to keep a secret. So Finn and Jake prepare a false robbery of Princess Bubblegum that is thwarted by PB being unrecognizable, but when this doesn't convince her, Finn tells the truth. PB can't stay mad at him, though she does make the duo go to the grand meeting of Ooh royalty dressed as her, where the Marquis and a red squirrel whose letters Jake won't respond to ambush them. Telling the truth is something that we all instinctively know is the right thing to do, and yet people will go against this when they feel as though telling the truth will result in more harm than good, because the path of least resistance is being truthful, as you don't have to remember and then reinforce a bunch of lies later down the line. But if being truthful hurts you, then remembering the lies is easier. But it's not easier for everybody. The Duke of Nuts is the one who will wind up being punished for Finn's lie about the potion. It's a lot easier to justify lying to stop yourself from being hurt, but harder to pass it on to someone else. So Finn and Jake set out on a journey to discover if the Duke of Nuts deserves to be lied about, as if the guy being evil at all would make it easier to digest. Ironically, the Duke also lying about his pudding habits is what caused a lot of the situation in the first place, a person lying to hurt themselves, making it easier for others to justify dogpiling on him, because he already has a history with no justification. Freak City. Finn and Jake encounter a beggar in the woods, and, hoping it's secretly a magic man, Finn gives him a sugar cube. It turns out to be a magic man, named Magic Man, and he rewards Finn by turning him into a giant foot until he learns his lesson. Finn is depressed because he's a foot, and can't be a hero anymore, though Jake tries reassuring him it's not so bad. When the duo fails to put out a fire, Foot Finn is thrown under a bridge with the other freaks of the area, all of whom reveal that they've been cursed by the Magic Man as well to be various other body parts. Jake tries to convince Finn to stay under the bridge and be afoot forever, but when Finn has a nightmare about this, he sings an auto-tuned song shaming the other body parts into leaving the bridge. After commanding them to form one giant super freak, they get a bit of their confidence back and confront Magic Man again, though he avoids their attacks as none of them have learned their lesson yet. Eventually Finn realizes the truth. Magic Man didn't turn them into freaks for a reason, he's just a jerk. This was the real lesson, and Magic Man converts them back before leaving, as the Super Friends vow to stay as one body anyway. The Magic Man is introduced in this episode, and with him comes a lesson about his character. He's a jerk, and there's a little more to it that matters right now. As a hero, Finn is constantly meant to look on the bright side of things and to look on the bright side of people. Everything that happens must have some small benefit to the world, and to accept that some things are just bad is a defeatist attitude. And yet, Jake embodies making the best of Finn becoming a giant foot, trying to get him to relax and accept the transformation. He's trying to teach Finn the heroic lesson, but the truth of the matter is that being a giant foot isn't great. He tries one last time to get the rest of the freaks under the bridge to forget about their transformations and the horrors they bring, but once they form a giant super freak, even this is not enough to defeat the Magic Man. It's only by accepting the truth that things can go back to normal, that some maladies are not good in any way, and that the lessons learned by the harsh reality would be better off unknown if that reality ceased to exist. Donny. While out on safety patrol, Finn and Jake encounter a massive plant-based jerk terrorizing a village of house people. They try to stop him, but he only harasses them instead, so Finn decides to take this giant, Donny, home to teach him how to be nice with songs. None of these songs seem to have any effect, so Finn leaves Jake behind to keep teaching Donny while he responds to a call for help in the distance. He finds out that the village is being attacked by Y-wolves, possessed by the spirit of inquiry and bloodlust, who explain that the obnoxygen produced by Donny's antics was poisonous to them, and now that he's gone, they're free to feast on the house people until their population balloons to the point that the cosmic owl will eat them. So Finn tries to get Donny back in the village, only for Donny to become a reformed man, Jake's songs finally reaching him and teaching him empathy. The trio returns to the village against Donny's wishes, where he tries singing to the Y-wolves to stop their attacks. Finn realizes that they're making fun of him, so he plays up how much of a dork Donny has become, causing the guy to go into a rage and reverting to his old, obnoxious self. Finn's upset he couldn't reform Donny completely, so they walk away as Donny thanks them for making him a jerk again. Donny is noxiously obnoxious, but he is very good at what he does, serving as the lesser of two evils among the village's people. Sometimes when the lesser of two evils is around for long enough, people forget about the greater of two evils, to the point where it starts to seem like a good idea to try out the other guys for a while, only to get their faces eaten by Y-wolves and remember why you tolerated that other guy in the first place. It's fine to resent a bad situation you're in, and it's fine to want to improve things to a degree, but outright rejecting everything that's maintained the status quo will often have disastrous results if, like Finn, you don't understand why people put up with the situation in the first place. Although personally, I think it would have been far funnier if Donny wound up trying to lecture the Y-wolves and ended up more obnoxious than before, like if he were singing a song about how to wear pants and they ran away in fear. Henchman. Finn and Jake see Marceline bullying an old man who she calls her henchman. Wanting to protect him, Finn's vow of heroic honor makes him volunteer to take the old man's place as Marceline's new henchman. Jake tries to protest this but is too afraid of vampires to do anything, and Finn is taken to a victim's house where Marceline turns his red bow tie white. She then raises an army of the undead and orders Finn to take them to the Palace of Nuts to crash a birthday party. But when they arrive, the undead simply party with the rest of the group while Marcy plays a song for the birthday baby. After ordering Finn to kill a cute plant that turns monsters when he hesitates, he finally realizes that Marcy is just messing with him, and the orders have been a series of pranks. But Jake finally gets over his fear enough to attack Marceline in the field, with Finn trying to stop him but ultimately settling for hiding her in his backpack while Jake stakes a double. Marceline thanks Finn for being a good henchman, while Jake and Finn leave, the dog believing he just saved his friend's life. Slowly over this season, we've seen Marceline the Vampire Queen go from an antagonist to a morally neutral deuteragonist. Her first appearance having her kick Finn and Jake out of their home, justified by the fact that it was technically hers first, and they were squatting. And this episode having her take Finn as a servant, then forcing him to do her bidding, justified by her bidding being more or less harmless. Even as she's traveling with Finn, she's making jokes at his expense, implying that that was the worst she was planning on doing. The point of her character is that she is this ageless vampire who has long since outlived the morals of the rest of the world. And while this means that she occasionally kicks kids out of their houses for no reason other than the fact that she can, she's also done a lot of good over her life, to the point of being a friendly face to most of those who don't have a bad first impression of her. She's even willing to fake being destroyed to keep Jake satisfied with the episode's ending, fear being one of the things she's surely dealt with more than any other reaction, considering how much she takes this aspect of herself in stride. Rainy Day, Daydream. Finn and Jake have a whole day plan that is ruined by an incoming knife storm, as in, it's raining knives. BMO is out of battery, so Jake suggests using their imaginations, though Finn thinks that is pointless, until Jake imagines that the floor is lava, so well, it starts to burn anyone who touches it. So Finn has to carry Jake upstairs to an imagination machine that will turn off Jake's imagination, dodging a series of traps only Jake can see, like a family of goblins, a riddle master with a terrible riddle, and a plague of snakes. Finn is eventually able to reach the off switch, only to realize that without his imagination, Jake has no personality. So Finn uses his own imagination to reimagine Jake's imagination machine, playing around a bit with the other imaginary creatures he keeps coming up with, before returning things to normal just as the knife storm lets up. Finn is more of a realist, at least as far as that term has meaning in the land of Ooh, compared to Jake, who is an idealist. Finn prefers actual, tangible experiences to fill his day, while Jake wants to spend his time with more introspection, which from the outside appears as laziness, when in reality he's flexing a valuable mental muscle. The ability to take mundane situations and then to find something more interesting about them is what gives Jake his personality, as it is with the show itself, notorious for being completely unpredictable, and making each episode worth watching as no amount of prior media knowledge could make the plots easy to see coming. So this episode serves as a microcosm of the show itself in these early days, where the wacky randomness that some of the audience may not be able to see the appeal in is the appeal. The fact that it eschews so many tropes and even common sense is what makes Adventure Time stand out from the rest of the cartoon world of the moment. What have you done? Finn and Jake have been sent on a secret mission to kidnap the Ice King and bring him to justice, though they struggle to remember what it was Princess Bubblegum told him he was being arrested for. They bring the Ice King back, where he's thrown into a dungeon with Finn and Jake told to await his screams of anguish, left alone with the prisoner while PB attends to other business. But while he's in his cell, the Ice King convinces Finn and Jake that they're the bad guys because they haven't charged him with anything recently and he's legally innocent. So Finn and Jake set the Ice King free and put themselves in the cell, with this act moving the Ice King so much he considers them friends. But PB leaves the hospital wing, finally revealing why she wanted the Ice King arrested. He gave the Candy Kingdom freezer burn flu by scratching his beard over the castle, and the only cure is his screams. Finn still doesn't want to punch him, as his beard scratching was likely accidental, but he goes to the Ice Kingdom anyway to confront the man. There, the Ice King is trying to play board games with the duo as he considers them friends, but when he tries to swat Jake, believing he's a bug, off of Finn's shoulder, Finn gets the idea to fake being killed by the blow, so the Ice King will loudly mourn his death. This mourning manages to reach the Candy Kingdom and it cures the freezer burn flu. As I've stated before, some series just need a bad guy to beat up on consequence-free, the kind of person that more or less already has it coming. This episode plays with the idea of a character like this in The Ice King. Finn and Jake are told to arrest him, which they do without question, assuming he's the kind of guy who deserves to be arrested. It's not until he declares himself actually innocent that his villain status is questioned. Sure, Ice King is still a bad guy, But is he the bad guy? Is being evil something that happens all the time, or is it just a factor of a bunch of different things one does across a spectrum of behaviors? It is later revealed that his grand misdemeanor was scratching snow out of his beard over the Candy Kingdom, which isn't an evil thing to do, and arguably not something he could have predicted would cause a pandemic. By this point in the series, Adventure Time is already questioning the roles of the heroes and the villains of the series, and willing to suggest that the roles are not as solid as so many other works portray them to be. Ice King can be a recurring villain, but that doesn't mean he's the antagonist of every episode, nor of every episode he's a part of. The end of the episode even forgives him to an extent, with the cure to the freezer burn flu not being extracted forcefully, but with deception instead. Finn meets his hero. After rescuing Mini Queen from a swamp giant, Finn and Jake come across the sword of Billy, one of Oo's greatest heroes, and this sword opens a crack to Billy's cave. They meet Billy, who is now old and retired. Finn and Jake talk about how he's an inspiration to them, but Billy says that he has long since given up on violently saving the day because it will just be dangerous again once he's done. So Finn and Jake set out to save the day non-violently, trying to help an old cobbler being chased by a dragon by feeding him, then opening up a gruel stand where they feed hungry people stone skin potions to make them tough enough not to need saving. The cobbler has to go to the dermatologist to get his skin de-stoned, and he leaves Finn and Jake behind to guard his store, though they meet with customers anyway and turn their shoes ultra-violent. Even giving Lumpy Space Princess a makeover where she becomes a killing machine. Ultimately, they come back across the swamp giant from before, trying to ask him to be nicer until Finn beats him up anyway. They return to Billy, telling him about how violence is actually great, and showing off the old lady the swamp giant did not kill as proof. This encourages Billy to start being a hero again, and he thanks Finn, saying he's his hero. Heroism is often a temporary solution to a permanent problem, with the deeds of various villains being a seemingly static part of the universe, requiring someone to step up and stop it. This is usually the role of Finn and Jake, who are the heroes who save the day, but never the heroes who save everything. Because no matter how much they beat up the bad guy of the week, next week there will be a new conflict they have to fight against too. It is for this reason that Billy, the old hero, has lost motivation to continue being a good guy. Why save the world if it's just going to get messed up a few days later? Finn and Jake try to fight against their nature by solving problems using more long-term non-violent solutions like feeding people and working in a hospital, but it's too hard to fight against who they are, and they struggle not to return to punching bad guys. But this is actually the solution to their problems, because as much as it seems like bad guys ruining everything is a staple of the fantasy genre and that one bad guy will just be replaced by another, what is also a staple of the fantasy genre is the fact that good guys appear week after week as though it were a consistent part of the universe too. The same logic that questions why the world ought to be saved if it's just gonna get jacked up again can apply to the villains. Why bother kidnapping a princess if she'll just be saved? Gut Grinder. While Jake is telling off Finn for playing his viola, and badly, they hear crying coming from the village of the Soft People. Finn investigates this crying and hears all their gold has been stolen by a monster named the Gut Grinder, and they cower in fear when Jake arrives because he looks just like the monster, at least in his larger form. Later on, they encounter the Cube People, who have also been robbed by the Gut Grinder, also fearing Jake's arrival until realizing he's just a cute dog. So Jake dons a disguise to enter the next village of Spiky People, where they once more hear tales of the Gut Grinder. Jake starts to worry that he's actually the Gut Grinder and that he's been subconsciously stealing gold behind Finn's back, and his disguise slips, prompting the Spiky People to arrest him. Finn vows to prove Jake's innocence by taking a gold tooth from another prisoner and luring the Gut Grinder back to the village. This works, and he starts to fight the massive monster, who indeed looks exactly like Jake. The real Jake, upset about being called a monster, breaks out of jail and matches the shape of the Gut Grinder, beating it up and stealing the gold as he chases after Finn. But Finn sees Jake's old viola and starts playing it badly, and Jake snaps out of his madness to tell him off. The Spiky People realize the Gut Grinder is actually a cloth suit, and inside is Sharon, the wife of the Spiky King, who made herself look like Jake because she thought he was hot, and stole gold to buy things. As a thanks for saving the day, the spiky people all group hug Finn and Jake, much to their dismay. We've seen before that Jake tends to steal subconsciously, but this was always limited to the realm of petty theft from mostly faceless individuals. Here, he starts to legitimately worry that he's stolen enough from some villages they've started fearing him, something that contradicts his nature as a good boy, because it affects the way others are viewing him. It turns out that Jake puts a lot of his self-worth in how other people treat him by default, and the fact that he has ceased to be a source of whimsy and starts to be the face some people attach to fear means he loses the self-worth of that idea. It's enough to drive him mad enough to actually become the type of monster everyone else is treating him like. Everyone but Finn, who asserts that his friend is innocent even as the two start realizing just how many coincidences it took for him not to be guilty. Ironically enough, it's actually Jake snapping at Finn for playing his viola wrong that brings him back to normal. After all the humanity he has lost, he still feels strongly about music. It's worth it to recall back in Rainy Day Daydream that one of the symptoms of Jake losing his imagination was forgetting how to play the viola. So it's when he yells at his friend that he remembers the times he yelled at him before, then kept being loved and accepted anyway.